Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Pivot on Hilal TV. Today I have with me four beautiful young women who are all activists, significantly from the University of Pretoria, my university, and it's always a pleasure to have individuals who are conscientious, who work hard, and who try to raise the bar. So with me is Miera Pillay. She is a BCom law graduate and final year LLB student from the University of Pretoria. She is the former chairperson of the Palestinian Solidarity Committee at the University of Pretoria and a proud member of the Zayatoon Foundation. And with her, Miera is Aisha Myberg. She's 22 years old. She has a BA in International Relations and Anthropology and an honors degree in International Relations. Aisha is also a former executive member of the Palestinian Solidarity Committee at the University of Pretoria and a passionate human rights activist. Now, Aisha and Miera and the two other ladies who will be joining us a little later have all come together to form an organization called, a foundation called Zayatoon Foundation. And we are here today to talk a little bit about that foundation and the role that these young ladies envision that young people should play in terms of raising awareness about Palestine, but not only about Palestine, about social justice per se, and how it is that the youth can influence a change in our community and ultimately, we hope, a change in policy. So with that, I'd like to say Assalamu alaikum and thank you very much to both of you for being here.
Walaikum salam. Thank you for having us.
So, Miera, let's start with you, right? You're still at the University of Pretoria, you're in the law faculty.
Yes.
I mean, that's a faculty that we've had lots of struggles with during Fees Must Fall, but there has definitely been a shift in terms of Palestine with the law faculty organizing webinars, seminars, and now the Center for Human Rights contributing to the university network's human rights document on the genocide in Gaza. As a law student, what, makes you pivot towards Palestine? And also, why is it important for you that young people should be politically active in this particular issue?
Well, I think when you first get to university as a law student, you are very much sort of thrown into the constitutionality of it all, and you work very intimately with the South African Constitution, and it takes you back to the historical context, placing ourselves in South Africa, and I think that really spoke to me as a young South African. So when you're dealing, or when you're working rather, with the Constitution so frequently, you kind of are able to spot discrepancies in other places. And you kind of ask yourself, why are there no sovereign constitutional laws like we have here in South Africa in other places? And that starts prompting you to ask yourselves those questions. So I think, yeah, that having that historical background with my studies, and then, taking notice and cognizance of everything around me, that sort of pushed me into the activism space. And then you'd find quite often, more often than not, that a lot of other law students are more politically inclined. And I think our studies have a lot to do with that, because we place everything back historically. And yeah.
Okay, so Aisha, she raises an important point. She says studies, influences your activism, but we know for the longest time that our studies were not decolonized, right? We were still very much into this frame of a colonized approach. And as an international relations student, I'm sure you can relate to that, because you must have seen significant discrepancies in the way in which courses were taught and what was taught, right? How did that shift your mindset and make you, one of those individuals who stood up and said, you know what, I need to be an activist? Because let's be honest, at the University of Pretoria, students generally are very apathetic, right? And so to get a significant amount of activism from any student per se is like shifting a mountain. So what drove you?
I think, there's this perception that students are apathetic when it comes to social rights issues, but I think it's a ripple effect. So when we joined PSC UP, I noticed that when one person takes a stand and says, okay, we want to motivate you guys to get involved, you'll see that there are a lot of students, like Miara said, that are politically inclined, that do care. There's just a space that needs to be created for them to express that. So especially as an international relations student and studying decolonization, I think the more you understand that students play a key role in changing the narrative and creating a new story of how it's supposed to be taught in schools. I mean, especially with the eduside happening in Palestine, students are a very central part of the movement, especially within South Africa, especially what we've seen at WITS and the encampment. That was seriously an amazing way to see that students come together, that they change the narrative for WITS and they encourage other people to join them. So I don't necessarily think people are always apathetic. I think they're just looking for that encouragement and a safe space, which is kind of what Zayatoon intended to create. We wanted to create a place where young people could come together, young and, the olders, but mostly young people, because we realize there's really a lack of safe spaces and environments where we can express how we feel and we can express what our thoughts are about the situation. Because I think a lot of people don't even ask students, okay, what do you think about the situation? How do you think you can contribute to making a change? So that's why we thought, starting at PSC UP was one good step. And now you have to carry on that activism. It can't just end, once you leave a certain institution. So, yeah.
So for both of you, you can both of you answer this. Tell me, what is it about your organization and its activism in terms of Palestine? And can you take it back to the university, or are you now focusing on civil society?
So must I go ahead?
Yeah, you go.
So the founding of Zayatoon came about because obviously Palestine is what united the four of us, right? So we thought that would most definitely be a central focus for us. But we also want to showcase to everyone that as much as people are showing solidarity for Palestine, there are so many other issues that we could actually bring to light because we've created this community of people now that show up to our events and that mobilize along with us. The fact that we can use that influence to showcase local initiatives or what's happening in Sudan and in Congo, we really want to make it a point that we want to reach the community in a way that extends beyond university. Because even when we were at PSC UP, we were very actively involved in our communities as well. And we did outreach programs. We also believe in intersectionality and being secular and really caring about human rights overall. Just because Palestine is a very major issue at the moment and because it united us, that's our central focus. But that doesn't mean that we sideline anything else. We actually want to use this opportunity to shine a light on that.
And just to add on to that, I feel like being in a student space for so long, you're almost constrained to an extent as well. There's limits as to what you can and cannot do.
Yes.
And so when we came together and we decided that we wanted to found Zayatoon, although Palestine is like the central focus of it all, another one of our main priorities was to make more of a tangible impact in South African communities as well, particularly focusing on the less privileged children and vulnerable groups as well.
Okay, so we have only 2 minutes before we go to the break, and I have to introduce your other colleagues. I just want to know quickly from you that with regards, the spirit of the youth, the ability to engage in disruptive politics, because disruptive politics usually have consequences, right? Do you see Zayatoon as being such an organization that will engage in disruptive politics, or, do you envision that the young or the youth in South Africa, especially from our communities, have the potential to do what the American students did?
100%. I think when it comes to disruptive politics and, student activism, the main crux of it all is having a space where you feel supported and a space where you feel empowered to stand up for what's right. And so I think Zayatoon will definitely establish itself as one of those organizations that gives support to those groups of students and those people. Because, ultimately we are also, I'm still a student, my colleagues are former students, so that holds home to us as well.
Would you like to add something to that, Aisha?
No, I think she said that quite perfectly. But I think when you look at it as destructive, what students can contribute is often more constructive than anything. So, and I think what happened in America recently is having such a ripple effect. Like I said earlier, what's happening at WITS, it's carrying on onto the universities, whether it be silently or not. You may not see it on mainstream media, but there are movements happening, and I think a lot of people are being more encouraged to actually speak out.
So for the young people who are watching this, is there a way that they can reach out to you and join your organization?
Definitely. We have an Instagram, and you can find that at Zayatoon Foundation SA on Instagram. And we're going to start a lot of social media outreach campaigns and hopefully get more people involved when we start an actual official team in the near future. So, yeah.
What's your parting words to the young people?
I would say be fearless. Don't let anybody tell you what you can and cannot do. Exceed your boundaries and always stand up for what's right.
And Aisha, as a parting comment, in terms of the political organization at Zayatoon, how do you envision taking this forward?
Well, we envision making a tangible impact and change, like Miara said, and we believe that even the tiniest bit of change can have a ripple effect. So whether we play a small part in the movement or we have bigger events later on in the future, we really believe that we can take this forward and encourage people to get involved and make sure that our communities and civil society are not left out of movements, because you don't have to be a student, you don't have to be a professor or someone in a high position to actually make a change in the world. Everyone's voice counts, and that's really the message we want to try and get across. So yeah.
So thank you so much for sharing these insights about the activism within Zayatoon. And I'm going to call your colleagues now, and we're going to take this discussion a little further.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
so
So
much.
we'll see you after the break.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the second segment of Pivot here on Hilal TV with my beautiful guests. The first, I would like to introduce our two other special ladies, Nasiha Juma. Nasiha is a BA LLB graduate from the University of Pretoria, and she's the former chairperson of the Palestinian Solidarity Committee at the University of Pretoria for the year 2022. And this is where her activism actually began. So it's amazing that it began at the University of Pretoria. That's certainly, something to be cognizant of. Then we have Zahra Omar Karam, who's a 23-year-old graduate in international relations from the University of Pretoria, and she is also a member of Zayatoon. So with that, I'd like to say assalamu alaikum, and thank you so much for being here together with your colleagues who I spoke to just a few minutes earlier.
Thank you for having us, Dr.Quraysha.
So, Zahra, let's start with you. Being a part of the PSC, being a UP student where the environment is very constrained, students are generally very conservative at the University of Pretoria. What brought you to this activism, and how was the political environment in UP, that allowed for activism, that allowed for you to raise your voices, and then subsequently drove this desire amongst you, the four young ladies, to set up Zayatoon?
Well, even before university, I think I was very passionate about politics. Always enjoyed reading the news, always enjoyed keeping up on just global matters in general. And when I met Nasia on campus, and when she became part of PSCUP, we actually became very close friends. And I think that's how I also got drawn into not only the Palestinian cause, but our friendship to kind of create something bigger than just PSCUP.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
So Nasia, if you look at UP again, do you think that there is scope for more activism in the university? For me, it's mind blowing. Okay, because when I was involved in FISMA's fall, the Muslim students, the Indian students were practically absent. And now to see four young, beautiful ladies like yourselves coming together, raising the flag, speaking about activism, is there an opportunity for more of this kind of work to be done at UP? And do you think that your organization, Zayatoon, can liaise with the current PSC at Tux to foster more ties and do something substantive?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think at University of Pretoria, the environment, there was a very big gap for, activism, if I can say, if you compare to University of Wits with the FISMA's 4 movement, for example. So I think when PSC started, a lot of students that were maybe wanting to get involved but didn't have that space to get involved, I think that's where they found that common ground, at the University of Pretoria and PSC. And I definitely think that Zayatoon can get involved with PSCUP, because I think a very important point with activism is unity. So I think it doesn't make sense for all different organizations to do their things individually, but rather sort of come together as a big group and unite with your activism. So I definitely think there's scope for PSCUP and Zayatoon to work together.
So I'd like to ask this question to both of you, right? Now that you're out of the university and you formed this particular organization, like what motivated you? When did you set up the organization? And what is it that you plan to do that is tangible in terms of changing I don't know, policy, changing how the community responds? And do you find that you are doing the kind of work? Do you show the due diligence that the American students and other Western students are doing, the homework they're doing, the research that they're doing, challenging structures of power, individuals, politicians of power? Do you have the potential, the capability, and do you think the youth have that potential and capability to do that, to go up to politicians, to go up to organizations, to go up to stores selling Coca-Cola or, in front of a KFC, etc., and to say, or Starbucks, like, why are you in here? Why are you buying? That kind of physical, momentum, is it there? Do you think it's going to be done?
Yes, I actually do believe that. I think with us in Zayatoon, and actually where it started in PSC, was activism on the front line. It's very important to actually go out there and impact change instead of just sitting behind a screen and posting a picture, for example.
Right.
Another thing is even like in the South African climate of that, if we look at like our constitution, for example, and we look at maybe like what it gives us rights to, like Section 27, for example, will give South African citizens rights to healthcare, social security, all of those things. But we see the lack in that. There is no implementation in our constitution, for example. So I think organizations like ours, and before even just focusing on the Palestinian struggle, addressing local issues in the community is very important as well, because those two are intersectional, the Palestinian struggle along with issues in our local communities. So I think if we can implement those things, like going to schools and making active changes, going to shops and, like you said, pulling the Clover milks off the shelf or the Cokes off the shelf, it's very important that we get that, and we need the support from actually our Muslim community in doing that. We see a lack of that. There is no efforts, if I can say, from the youth and just people in general to actually go out there and implement the change. So, yeah.
And just to add on that, I think that with that being said, of course there's hope. And there's not only hope that students would do this or the youth would do this. We as South Africans as a whole should be combating this. I mean, we've lived through apartheid. I mean, maybe our generation hasn't experienced it, but our parents have been in the front line of apartheid, and our grandparents. So I think it's not even a question of should we do this or do we think we might be able to do this. We should be. We should be boycotting, and we should be going and just educating people about Palestine, whether that be the youth or the elders.
So Zahra, I mean, you raise a very important point that you yourselves have not really experienced apartheid, although we're living in, many aspects of apartheid in South Africa still. But your parents have. Do you think it's important to have your parents' support to do this, to have this vision that you have for Zayatoon? I mean, you are young, you're females, you're Muslim, you're Indian, and now you're going to come out and start demanding structural change. You're going to face a lot of resistance, and and we have a very conservative religious society as well. We'll say, what are young people, girls doing this and things like that. Do you need your parents' support?
Of course.
Do you get your parents' support? And do you think it's important that parents show up with their children to participate in these activities?
I think it's very important, and I think it's also that goes back to also parents being involved in their kids' life. It's important to know what your kids are doing and also support them, and like I said, be aware of what they're actually doing, because how are you going to support your kids if you don't really know what they're doing? So I think, of course, yes, and my parents support me in what I do. So yes, I think that is very important.
So say in terms of parent support, but you being a Gen Z, right? That generation, whom we are putting our hopes on in terms of bringing about humanity and restructuring the world with a more humane face. Because certainly the older generation, the people in power at the moment, simply do not have the ethical and moral authority to bring about change. We believe it's going to come from your generation. What do you think about your generation and its potential?
I definitely, the Gen Zs, I definitely do think there's a lot of potential. But as I said, there's also a lot of laziness, if I can say, in the communities. Sometimes people also feel like their efforts are not seen or heard, or there's just not a lot of hope, especially with the Palestinian issue. You feel that attending protests or things you're not making a change, but you actually are. Like, any form of change is good and should be done. So I definitely think it's important for the youth to really come and unleash their full potential, where there are spaces to do that, for example, Zayatoon now, to come and get involved in our events and our activities, just so that you are contributing to society. To
So
make a change.
how do the youth then mobilize? Either of you can answer that.
Yeah, I think just to add on to what she said and to answer your question, it's also important to remember that just how we do post and we go out for Palestine, and we could obviously improve, we must have that same passion for other issues, like obviously like Sudan. I mean, we're so passionate about posting about Palestinian kids, but in our own community, in our own continent, Africa, there's children suffering. So I feel like it's also important to start, from home, to do the work at home and then go out. And in terms of mobilizing, I know when we were part of PSC, we would have many different movements, like from protests, from outreach, just even doing basic education. I mean, at campus, so many people don't even know about the Palestinian struggle in general. So I feel like just making an effort as I said, starting within your community and then going out is very important.
Masiha?
Yeah, I think what Zahra said was important with regarding to, like, the educational aspect of it, because I know when I was in PSC, something I focused on as chairperson was really the educational side of things, and I think with now, I mean, that was in 2022, so 2024, so much has actually changed, and with what's happening in Palestine now, so many more people are becoming aware of actually what the real issue is and starting to understand. So I think you must take advantage of that and really educate further on that. And even just hosting small things like bucket runs, or even if you have a bake sale to raise funds for your organization, make sure to sort of include maybe pamphlets on what's happening in Palestine or something, just to get people's minds going and starting to truly understand.
So we're at the end, and I just have 30 seconds from both of you. What message would you like to give to the community that's watching this show?
To the community, I think it's not enough to just post, just say I'm going to send a post on Instagram and, I'll donate here and there. I think you actually need to come out and show your support. I mean, think of it, how I like to think of it is, I like to think that, what if this was me? And, what if I had a child? What if this was my sister? What if this was my brother? What if this was my family? So I always think about that when I do anything. And I think it's not even difficult to come out and show your support. It's not difficult to come out and say, and boycott. So for me, I think the biggest thing is actually showing up as a community together.
Yeah. I don't think you need to necessarily label yourself as an activist to sort of show up. You can just show up in your own capacity as an individual. And I think what's important with revolution, and I've said this before, is that it doesn't really stop at any age, gender, or race. What revolution really recognizes is injustice. And I think what's happening right now in Palestine is an immense, deep injustice. So I think just being human should be enough for you to come out and really support.
Thank you so much. That's a very powerful note to end on. And I would like to remind everybody, our viewers here, the important thing is, exactly as Nasiha has said, is, do you recognize the injustice? And are you prepared to do something about it? Or are you going to be an armchair critic? Fi amanillah, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.